are talking about the Corporate Transparency Act. We are on the final and fifth video. If you have not seen the previous 4 videos, I highly encourage you to do so in order to better understand where we're at right now. In video 1, we talked about what the Corporate Transparency Act is. Video 2, we talked about some defining terms that's used throughout having a conversation about the Corporate Transparency Act so that you're better able to follow along in the conversation. Video 3, we talked about if your company has to report or not. So what we talked about in that video is the 23 exemptions that apply, and if you fall into the 23 exemptions and how you actually can measure and what you should consider when you're measuring if you fall in one of those 23 exemptions. And then video 4, we talked about when your company has to report and what will happen if you don't report. Now we're going to wrap it up with the meat and potatoes. What do your company have to report, and who does your company have to report? So if you're not one of the 23 exempt entities, you are a reporting company, you have a deadline to report, but what exactly is it that you are reporting, and who are you reporting? So let's look at the first thing. You're a reporting company. And if you're a reporting company, you're reporting 3 different things. You're reporting your beneficial owners, and we'll talk more about that. You're reporting your company applicant. We talked a little bit about it, but I will cover it again. And then you're reporting information on the entity itself. So that is the information that you are actually reporting. When you're reporting the beneficial owners, there's 4 pieces of information you have to be prepared to report. And remember, we talk about you have to be accurate with this information. If you find out this information is inaccurate, then you have to voluntarily submit the correct information within 90 days of the time, within 90 days of the deadline you had to make this reporting. So the 4 pieces of information that you have to report for beneficial owners include the beneficial owner's full legal name, the beneficial owner's date of birth, the beneficial owner's complete current address, and you have to submit a unique identifying document. So this could be a driver's license, a U.S. passport, anything that's state issued, local government or tribe issued. And if you don't have any of this, a foreign passport, if one doesn't have any of the previous, then you can submit that as well. But it has to be the unique identifying ID. So those are the 4 pieces of information for a beneficial owner that has to be submitted. Now, we talked about the 23 exemptions for a reporting company to know if they have to report or not, but I want to just mention an exception. So when we talk about a beneficial owner, so you're not exempted, you don't fall under the 23 exemptions, so you are reporting as a reporting company. There is an exception for a beneficial owner. So if the beneficial owner is a minor child, then the minor child, you don't have to report those 4 pieces of information if the individual is a minor child. In that case, what a company would do is report the information about the minor's child parent or their legal guardian. But that has to be reported in order for this exception to apply. So you are a reporting company, you have a beneficial owner, your beneficial owner is a minor, you do not have to report the minor, but in place of the minor, you have to report the parent or legal guardian in order for the exception to apply. And then there's other exceptions as well. If individuals fall under these things and considered a beneficial owner, it could be someone that's a nominee. There's some companies that establish themselves and they want anonymity, and so they may appoint a nominee to establish the company. Then there's an exception for a nominee, an agent, or someone that's a custodian who's acting on behalf of an actual beneficial owner that generally performs these services contractually or in a advisory capacity. So those exceptions apply if the actual beneficial owner is reported. Not the person, but the beneficial owner still has to be reported. So just to give you an example, if I am a beneficial owner and I have someone who is a nominee or an agent, then that nominee or agent that's in place of my name publicly, right? Because my business, there's anonymity to my business. So a nominee would be showing up instead of me on the Secretary of State. Well, when we go to report, then the nominee name is not going to be submitted because there's an exception. But I still have to report my name in that place. And again, remember we talked about in video 1 that the law states this reporting information that's reported is not publicly available, except those things that I talked about in video 1. So those exceptions apply to those individuals as long as you are reporting what needs to be reported in place of those individuals. The information for the company applicant is the same thing for the beneficial owner. So when we talk about the company applicant, someone who has directly or indirectly filed, so someone who's directly pushed the paperwork or someone who controlled the paperwork, they're the company applicant. And if the company applicant files, they have to still submit that same information: full legal name, date of birth, complete current address, and their unique identifying number. Now, there is an exception that when the company applicant, I talked about this a little earlier, is someone who registers or forms company in their regular course of business. In that case, they don't have to submit their current address. They can submit their business address. The address is not required, but the other information is required. Now, so that's the beneficial owner, company applicant. Now you still have to report the information about the company itself. And in that case, there's going to be 6 pieces of information that needs to be reported. You have to report the full legal name of the company. If the company has any trade name or doing business as, you have to report that. You have to report the complete address of the principal place of business, meaning where's the heart, like where is either the headquarters, the home of that company. You have to report that address. If it's not in the U.S., then you have to report the primary location in the U.S. where the company conducts business. You have to report jurisdiction, like where it's formed. So where was the company formed? Because where it's formed may not be the same place that the principal place of business is. You have to report, for a foreign company, you have to report the state or tribal jurisdiction of first registration. So if you're a foreign company and you register to do business in the U.S., you have to report the original jurisdiction of that foreign company. And then you have to report the employee identification number or tax identification number for the company, the IRS EIN or TIN. Now, I talked about this a little bit, I touched on this a little bit earlier about the company applicant. So we just talked about the company applicant required information, which is the same as the beneficial owner, with that one exception. If you are a company or a professional service provider that registers company as a normal business, then you don't have to report the address. But also the exception for the reporting company. If you are a reporting company, you don't have to report a company applicant if your company was created or registered before January 1, 2024. So only the entities that were created after January 1, 2024, those are the only ones that have to report their company applicant. If you were established before January 1, 2024, you're reporting all beneficial owners and the information about the company itself. You're not reporting any company applicant. But if you were established after January 1, 2024, you're reporting all 3 pieces of that information. We talked about the FinCEN identifier when I explained what it is. Again, we talked about it being a unique identifying number, and it can be created for the individual or the reporting company. But again, I just wanted to reiterate this when we got to this point to talk about the FinCEN identifier. You can create it for the individual or the company. However, when you create it for the individual, So say I'm a company applicant, so you're creating it for me as an individual. That number is the number that when we supply it, it's going to use the same information that's required for us to be submitted on a report. That FinCEN number is tied to that information. So instead of reporting the 4 pieces of information that's required of me, I'm just going to give you my number. The reporting company will plug that number in, and then all my information will be tied to that. Well, as of right now, as of at least September 2023, and nothing has changed since then, the FinCEN has stated that if an individual, so far as the individual number, if an individual is no longer affiliated with a company, if it's someone who was a beneficial owner by, let's just say, owning 25% or more, they were a beneficial owner, but they sold all of their shares. They don't have 25% ownership. They have 0. They sold it. They're no longer tied to that company. But if that individual created a FinCEN number, even though they're no longer tied to that company, they have to always keep that FinCEN number up to date. So if any of those 4 pieces of information change, their address, their name, if anything changed, you have to keep up with it. Otherwise, you will fall under the criminal, civil, be subjected to the criminal and civil penalties. Until they're able to, which they say they are trying to do, assess options to allow individuals to deactivate that FinCEN number. Until they come up with something like that, that FinCEN number is not deactivated. And it doesn't matter if you are no longer affiliated with a company, you still have to report your information and keep up to date with that information for your FinCEN number. All right, so that is all the information about the Corporate Transparency Act we talked about in these 5 videos in a very summarized, layman terms way, so that you have a profound understanding of what it is, who is responsible to adhering to it, what you have to adhere to, and what happens if you do not. So I hope these 5 short videos have really helped you. Make sure you go to www.fincen.gov/BOI to file electronically. That is the full website to go to file electronically. You can go to fincen.gov and kind of peruse and click on different things to bring you to different pages. But if you want to go to just file electronically, /BOI, and you can file electronically. And again, you will have the option to file online or download a very active PDF that you can submit whenever you're ready, and you can use that same PDF to make any updates when they are applicable. I hope this was very helpful. And again, be empowered. Coming from the Empowerment Influencer, I want to see you win. And the only way to win is to understand what is required of you and to make sure that you do something with that information.